Death row inmate killed inside protected prison unit. How did this happen? At 4:23 p.m., during what was supposed to be routine movement inside a high-security prison, something went wrong. Behind a locked cell door, on a wing designed to protect him, a man serving multiple life sentences was suddenly attacked. Minutes later, he was found on the floor, unresponsive. He wasn't supposed to die that day. Not like this. Leslie Patrick Bailey had already been sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars for crimes that shocked an entire nation. The system had taken over. Justice, in the eyes of the law, had already been decided. But inside prison walls, there's another system, one that operates in silence, driven by its own rules. So how did two inmates reach him in a unit meant to keep him safe? And why does this case raise a deeper question? What really happens when justice inside a courtroom collides with justice inside a prison? Leslie Patrick Bailey's path to that prison cell didn't begin with headlines or national outrage. It began in the neglected corners of East London, in neighborhoods where poverty, overcrowding, and limited supervision created an environment where the most vulnerable could easily disappear without immediate notice. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, areas like Hackney had become ground zero for a series of disturbing patterns. Young boys vanishing, stories dismissed, and warnings that didn't travel far enough, fast enough. Bailey himself grew up inside that environment. Born in the early 1950s, he drifted through unstable jobs and a transient lifestyle. He wasn't known for leadership or charisma. Instead, he became part of something larger, a loose network of men who would later be linked together through investigations. At the center of that network was Sidney Cook, a fairground worker who used his position to identify vulnerable children moving through crowded public spaces. Bailey's role was simple but critical. He drove. He transported. He helped move victims from public areas into isolated locations where no one was watching. Others in the group played different roles. Some lured, some organized, some participated more directly. But together, they formed a system that operated quietly in plain sight. Throughout the mid-1980s, this network carried out a pattern that investigators would later describe in chillingly consistent terms. Targets were often young boys between the ages of 6 and 14. Locations varied: fairgrounds, streets, low-income housing estates. But the method remained largely the same. Quick contact, sudden disappearance, and then silence. What made the case even more difficult for authorities was how long these incidents remained disconnected. Missing persons reports came in, but without clear links between them. It took time for patterns to emerge. Families searched, communities worried, but the scale of what was happening wasn't immediately visible. That began to change when physical evidence started to surface. Remains discovered in rural areas outside London pointed to something more organized. Investigators launched a focused operation, revisiting old cases, re-examining timelines, and speaking to anyone who might have seen something. Slowly, a picture began to form. Bailey was eventually arrested in connection with one of these cases. At first, like many others involved, he said very little. But as the investigation progressed and pressure mounted, something shifted. He began to talk. What he provided wasn't just a confession, it was a roadmap. He described locations, movements, and roles. He pointed investigators toward areas where evidence could be found. His statements led to the arrest of other members connected to the network. For law enforcement, it was a breakthrough. For families, it was the beginning of answers they had waited years to hear. Court proceedings followed, stretching across multiple cases and timelines. Bailey faced charges tied to several incidents, and over time, he received multiple life sentences. In court, details emerged about how the group operated, how victims were targeted, and how long the activity had gone undetected. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Communities demanded change. Authorities faced questions about missed warning signs, and the justice system moved to ensure that those involved would not return to society. But sentencing was only part of the story. Inside prison, Bailey entered a system that functioned very differently from the outside world. Because of the nature of his crimes, he was placed in a segregated unit designed to protect individuals considered at risk from other inmates. These units, often referred to as vulnerable prisoner wings, are meant to limit contact and reduce the chances of violence. On paper, the system works. In practice, it's more complicated. Even within segregated areas, inmates interact during certain periods of the day. Movement is controlled, but not entirely eliminated. And within those moments, tensions can build, especially when individuals with different backgrounds, histories, and reputations share the same space. Bailey arrived at Whitemore Prison, a high-security facility known for housing some of the most serious offenders. The structure was modern, surveillance was extensive, and protocols were strict. But even in a place like that, not everything can be predicted. In the months following his arrival, there were signs that Bailey's presence had not gone unnoticed. Reports suggested that he received threats. Notes were passed. Conversations stopped when he entered certain areas. None of this was unusual in that environment, but it indicated that, despite being in a protected unit, he was not completely isolated from risk. Then came October 7th, 1993. It was during a period known as association time, a window when inmates are allowed limited movement within their unit. Cells open. Individuals talk, move around, and interact under general supervision. It's one of the few times during the day when prisoners are not confined to their cells. At some point during that period, 2 inmates approached Bailey. What followed happened quickly and without warning to others nearby. By the time staff realized something was wrong, it was already over. Bailey was found inside his cell, unresponsive. At first, there was confusion about what had happened, but an examination soon confirmed that this was not self-inflicted. There had been a struggle. Investigators moved in immediately. The prison was locked down. Everyone in the unit was questioned. But as often happens in cases like this, cooperation was limited. Inside prison culture, there's an unspoken rule. People don't talk. Even when something happens in plain sight, details are withheld. Fear, loyalty, and self-preservation all play a role. Despite that, authorities were able to identify 2 individuals connected to the incident: Michael Caine and John Brooks. Both were already serving lengthy sentences. Evidence, including surveillance and movement patterns, placed them near Bailey at the time of the attack. They were later charged, tried, and convicted. But even with those convictions, questions remained. How did they gain access to Bailey in a unit designed to protect him? Were there warning signs that were missed? Could the outcome have been prevented? The case sparked immediate debate. Some saw the incident as a failure of the prison system, proof that even the highest levels of security have gaps. Others viewed it through a different lens, pointing to the complex dynamics that exist inside correctional facilities. There were also broader implications. Bailey had been one of the few individuals willing to speak in detail about the network he was part of. His cooperation had helped uncover crimes, identify others, and provide direction in ongoing investigations. With his death, any additional information he might have shared was lost. For investigators, that meant potential leads that would never be followed. For families, it meant questions that might never be answered. The incident led to reviews of prison procedures, particularly around vulnerable prisoner units. Discussions focused on supervision during association time, communication between staff, and how threats are assessed and managed. Changes were considered, and in some cases implemented, but the reality remained: no system is without risk. Bailey's story, from the streets of East London to a high-security prison cell, highlights a series of failures and consequences that unfolded over years. It shows how environments, decisions, and systems can intersect in ways that lead to outcomes no one fully controls. And in the end, what happened inside that cell on October 7th didn't just close one chapter. It left behind a set of unanswered questions that continue to follow the case long after the investigation ended. In the end, Leslie Patrick Bailey never reached the outcome the court had decided for him. His life didn't conclude in a courtroom or through a scheduled process. It ended inside a prison cell during a moment that was supposed to be routine. For some, that outcome raised difficult questions, not about what he had done, but about how the system responded. A man placed in a unit designed for protection still became a target. A controlled environment still allowed something to slip through. If you want more stories that explore what really happens behind those walls, the final moments, the unseen dynamics, make sure to subscribe and stay with us for the next prison documentary.